Hey guys, it's Billy Bross from the Homebrew Academy. I'm really happy to be interviewing Chris White of White Labs. He is the founder, CEO, and president of White Labs. They're a fermentation company serving the beer and wine industries. If you're a home brewer, I'm positive you've heard of White Labs, and I'm almost positive that you've used their products before. I've been using their yeast for going on 9 years now. So, Chris, really an honor and fantastic to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to talk about this new product, Pure Pitch, that you guys came out with. When I first heard about it, I was super excited about it. I think it's a great idea. I also have a couple of selfish homebrewing questions I want to ask you. But first,
Sure.
I want to ask you something else to kick it off. So there's a lot of people in the beer industry that I look up to. You can call them mentors, I guess, just people that I learn from. You're one of them. Your yeast book that you wrote with Jamil was fantastic, one of my favorite beer books, and I've read a ton of beer books. So Jamil is another one, Charlie Bamforth, Gordon Strong. So I want to ask you, in the beer industry, who do you look up to? Who do you learn from?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't really got asked that one before. And a lot of people. Michael Lewis was the first professor at UC Davis in brewing. He was hired in around 1963, and then Charlie Bamforth is the second one. He took Michael Lewis's place here at Davis, but Michael Lewis is still around teaching as emeritus. He's retired, but he's teaching the UC Davis Brewers Extension. So I remember so many things from some of the classes I had from him as an undergrad, and he really sparked my interest in brewing and the science of brewing. And there's so much biochemistry to brewing. You know, I was a biochemistry student at the time I took his class as an undergrad at UC Davis. So that would be the main person. And then so many people. Graham Walker is another person that comes to mind. He's a yeast scientist in Scotland.
Okay.
And he's in the States quite a bit. And he's wrote a great book on yeast that is brewer's yeast, but also all sorts of other yeast strains that are used in pharmaceutical applications and distilling and things like that. So Graham Walker is a great resource on yeast, and I go to him a lot of times with different questions and ideas.
Okay, fantastic. Good answer.
Thanks.
So let me ask you a few homebrewing questions now. So I have a video on my blog. It's probably one of the most highly trafficked blog posts that I have, and it's about how to rinse your yeast. I actually call it how to wash your yeast because homebrewers never use the right terminology, and we call it yeast washing, not yeast rinsing, but it is yeast rinsing. And a lot of people do it. Like I said, it's a really popular post. I like to rinse my yeast, but I'm always a little bit concerned about contamination. Because, I follow the best practices. I think I'm pretty clean. But, at the end of the day, I'm in my kitchen and not a lab. And, it might not be totally clean in there. We don't have any pets, but we dog sit once in a while, and there's probably some hairs flying around somewhere. So how big a risk is it, even if you're following best practices as a home brewer, to do this process?
I actually suggest everybody kind of is different about it, but I often suggest people not do it for that same reason, because the risks, are minimal compared to the benefit in some cases. So, because if you're rinsing it, you're handling it again, and if you're handling it again, you can introduce contamination or yeast stress. So, if it's just like as a matter of practice, you should rinse it. Then I would say no, you don't need to. But in some cases, I think it is good. If you're making a highly hop beer and you got a lot of hops in there, dry hops especially, or a lot of trub. If you're making a high alcohol beer and you're going to store the yeast for a couple of weeks and you want to get rid of that 8% ethanol, that's a good idea to rinse.
Right.
So, I think when the beers are over 7%, when you have hops and malt, a lot of trub, then I think it makes sense. Or dark wort. Mm-hmm. Which yeast doesn't survive as well in storage in darker beer.
Yeah.
But if it's just like a nice little golden ale or a Hefeweizen or something like that, and you're going to use the yeast fairly quickly, I'd say you don't need to rinse it.
Gotcha. And I think the main reason that at least my readers do this is to reuse it and really to save money, which is probably not the best thing for White Labs. But
I talk about it all the time, though, because I think it's just information is never a bad thing, and that's what's done in the commercial brewing industry is yeast is reused, and there's reasons why it works really good there. But a home brewer can replicate a lot of that, at least for a couple of generations, even maybe not 10 or 15 generations that some commercial breweries would get, but that's also doable by a home brewer with if they're using the yeast a lot and they have good practices. But to reuse it, you don't have to rinse it, and that's kind of what I mean. Like, you can leave it in the wort that it was, the beer that it was in. If you're going to use the yeast again in a couple of days, and it's fairly low alcohol beer, then you wouldn't even need to worry about rinsing it.
Gotcha. And then and when you rinse it, a lot of these guys they're rinsing it, reusing it, and then with that new batch they do the same thing. Wash, rinse, repeat. Yeah. And I assume that every time you do that you really multiply the effects or the risks of contamination.
Right. That rinsed water, is it sterile?
Right.
Probably not. Not too many people have autoclaves at home. It's going to be maybe boiled, or it's going to be treated in a pretty good way, but it's generally not sterile. So you got to keep that in mind too if you're rinsing. And I think the biggest key, besides when you're reusing yeast, is really how quickly you use that yeast from the beer is done. Because yeast want to keep living. They want to be. They don't want to go into dormancy, and so that shortens their shelf life, if you want to use that word. So their lifespan. So if a beer takes 14 days to where and it's done to the acid arrest, you should be reusing that yeast within a couple days of that 14 days. But often what we do is we collect it another week or so later, then we put it in the fridge for a couple of weeks. That's a long time for yeast to be sitting around before it's reused again. So you're not going to get too many generations out of it. But if you were able to collect it within a day or two of final gravity on the previous beer, reuse it, it's going to be really strong, it's going to ferment really well, and you'll get more generations out of it. But we often don't, that's what they can do in commercial brewing because they're brewing every day, ideally, making a lot of beer. But in home brewing, we're often not doing it that way.
Right. And the other difference is, too, is that they're using conicals, and they can dump the trub out and get a pretty, clean pitch of yeast. Would you give the same advice to a home brewer using a flat-bottom carboy where they really, if we're just talking about reusing and not rinsing, where they really can't separate out that trub? Or would you say in that case, you really should rinse it and get that other crap out of there?
Yeah, commercial breweries, they often don't get a lot of cold break anyway because the hot break is so great. So the kettles are so awesome, and the whirlpool is really good. So they're bringing a lot less trub over to the fermenter, and then the cold break, a lot of them don't even separate it out. It's not enough to really mess with the yeast culture they're collecting. But in home brewing, if we're getting a lot of break in the fermenter, it's still debatable. We have done lots of tests where we put a lot of trub with the yeast, and it doesn't affect it doesn't affect the viability of the yeast. There's nutrients there. There's fatty acids. So it may perturb the look of it. It may overestimate. It looks like you have a lot of yeast, but you only have a little because a lot of it's trub. But it doesn't have a big effect on viability.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So that could be, if you're worried about contamination, maybe don't even worry about rinsing it. Maybe just, racking a new batch right on top of it.
Well, I still like to collect the yeast because I like to clean that fermenter. If we rack right on top, we've got a lot of yeast there, and we haven't cleaned the fermenter. By collecting it, whether you rinse it or not, you can use a portion of that into your next beer instead of all of it, and you can clean out that fermenter really nicely. So we sanitize it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. That's a good answer. That's really helpful.
Okay.
So one more homebrewing question for you. So there's a lot of best practices around fermentation, and specifically temperatures, aeration, and pitching rates.
Right.
So there's certain guidelines and rates that are recommended you stay within. Do you have any good examples of people who intentionally break the rules on either of those things? With the end goal of making a better beer, where maybe it's better to get really crazy with the temperatures or pitching rates or aeration to achieve a certain flavor profile?
I'd actually encourage people to break those rules all the time.
Cool.
Those are some of the tools you have in making different flavors and making different beer styles. And I think people get often too stuck on a certain pitch rate or a certain temperature. Then we're narrowing our tools and handling the biology of the fermentation and allowing things to happen. So even when writing the book, Jamil was funny. He was always like, well, we got to put some guidelines here. And so we tried to make it to where we said, here's a recommendation or a guideline, but you're free to do some different things. Lowering the pitching rate on Belgian ales and Hefeweizens and stuff like that to get more esters is a great thing to do, because if you overpitch those, the yeast doesn't grow enough to make those esters and some of those fusel alcohols that you want in the flavor. And people say, why is there no banana character in this Hefeweizen? Well, that can often be an overpitching situation. So you want to pitch less on that. And some of the Belgian beers, it can go into the high 70s, low 80s in fermentation temperature and taste excellent.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that one about underpitching the Hefeweizen yeast too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a great example of, you're not following the recommended pitching rates, but if you want those flavors, that's what you do.
Right. And we got to then say, well, where do those recommended pitching rates come from, for example? And in early homebrew, when homebrewers were looking in literature early on in the homebrewing movement, all the literature is about lagers. So it was a lager pitching rate that we adopted in making all of our ales. And that's still what we use mostly in the United States. And so we have the result of that is some pretty clean tasting ales, because we're using these kind of lager rate pitching rates, where they're about half of that in the UK still for ales.
Hey, Chris, you there?
Back? Yeah, sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's okay. Let's see. I'm going to change one setting on my my recording. Okay. Okay, you're back. Well, that's why we record these things and don't do them live. I'll edit that out.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll get back into it. All right, so we
Are you broadcasting from now?
Where am I?
Yeah.
I'm at my home in Denver.
Okay, I knew it was around Boulder as we were talking, but I wasn't sure if it was Denver or one of the other.
Sort of downtown Denver.
Okay, great.
Cool. Okay, so we had a small glitch there, but we're back now, and we were talking about different variables that we can tweak in specifically during fermentation. And so along the same lines, I think the main takeaway is that you have to experiment and you have to break those rules. Yeah. So there's a ton of variables in homebrewing already. Those are only 3 that we mentioned: pitching rate, temperatures, aeration. So, where is the low-hanging fruit there? If you're recommending to someone, if you're going to experiment with those 3 or something during fermentation, what would you tweak first to try to improve your beer and see some pretty cool results?
The first thing I would do is try to get the 8 to 10 ppm on dissolved oxygen. I think dissolved oxygen is one of the most important things, because if that's not optimum, if you start playing with those other things, you're not going to get the results you want. If you start lowering the pitching rate and you have low dissolved oxygen, you're going to get some wacky results. So you optimize the dissolved oxygen first, and that is hard to do because no one really measures the dissolved oxygen in the wort. We put a setting, we put a flow rate, we put a time of pure air, pure oxygen ideally, but we don't go back and measure it because those tools are expensive, $10,000 typically, but now there's some instruments closer to $1,000, but that's still a lot. Yeah. So, but if in a 5-gallon batch of beer, normally 2 minutes with pure oxygen gets you close to that. But
okay.
But still it'll depend on the beer and the temperature of that wort and a whole bunch of other things. But if you can work on optimizing that, and when that is because if you adding more air and oxygen, you're not getting a lower final gravity. You're not getting changes in some of the physical properties of the fermentation. You've achieved the maximum dissolved oxygen that you need. So if you optimize that first, then I think playing with the pitching rate is a really easy one to do, and then you can change up some of the characteristics pretty quickly, and temperature depending on the beer styles you're making.
Gotcha. So for example, if I'm making say I'm making a British mild, and I want to experiment with my British ale yeast, so I have the oxygenation is correct, got my 8 to 10 ppm. And then I'm deciding, do I go with a lower pitch rate for that yeast, or do I go with maybe a little bit higher temperature to see what kind of flavors I can get? Which one would you choose?
On the mild, I would probably say a lower pitching rate.
If I were using, I use OO2 a lot.
Low, because you don't want it too. The mild is going to have a lower malt flavors and little lower gravity beer, so I don't want to have a higher fusel level. So if you did raise the temperature at all, I would say not do that until about 48 hours into the fermentation. Then let the temperature come up. But if you do it in the beginning, you're going to get some higher fusel levels.
Okay, gotcha. So if I'm using WLP02, that's the English ale yeast, right? Yeah. So if I'm using that, I want to experiment with a mild, maybe lower the pitching rate a little bit, and then keep the temperature. What range do you think I should keep that in for the first 48 hours? High
68
60s?
degrees.
Yeah. And then if I am going to raise it, do it after 48 hours?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, right at 48, though, because by 72 or so, it should be slowing down.
Right. Gotcha. And will that help with the attenuation also by letting it go up a little bit?
It does. It really helps the beer finish out.
Okay, good. That's one of my favorite styles to brew, and that's one of my favorite strains. So these are selfish tips, but hopefully it helps other people too.
And that strain even enjoys a little higher oxygen levels. If you can get up to 15 to 20 ppm, the strain even performs better. But that's really hard to do in home brewing settings. In commercial breweries where the fermenters are a little more pressurized and it's going through some inline piping and stuff, you can get higher dissolved oxygen levels. But without some kind of counter pressure, you can't really do that in home brewing. But if you ever had equipment that allowed that, or you started a commercial brewery, keep that in mind with those.
Yeah, well, I use one of the oxygen tanks from Home Depot, and I think I blasted for 60 seconds. So maybe I'll blast it for a little bit longer next time.
Yeah, go another 60 seconds.
Yeah, cool. Okay, awesome tip. So, I want to ask you about pure pitch now. This is a really big thing for you guys. Your vials are so iconic, so where the heck are they going?
Right, and that's funny you say that, because that's kind of what I wrote down a few times, like, are we crazy? Why would we do this? Because the vials have been kind of a symbol of White Labs yeast. But I really feel this is better for the yeast. I mean, I've thought of a new way of making the yeast, that we could package the yeast in the same kind of fermenter it grew in, and that wouldn't be a vial. So since I just thought of this process as being way better for the yeast, way better for its shelf life and potential purity, we decided to be okay with going away from the vial and introducing something new.
Hey, well, if it's something that's going to improve the beer, and it reduces a lot of waste also, right?
Yes. Yeah. So would you like me to describe it now?
Yeah, that'd be great if you could go into it. Especially the one part I didn't quite understand is that you're using the same packaging that it's grown in, which kind of blows my mind. So if you could elaborate on that too, that'd be great.
That's what we built a whole patent around, is shipping the yeast in the same container it was grown in. And it reduces a lot of waste, because I'll describe how we make it. We're not using a lot of chemicals and things now, because traditionally you grow yeast in stainless steel propagators, just like a lot of stainless steel fermenters in a brewery. And then we would collect the yeast from the bottom of those tanks, centrifuge it or not, and then put it into other tanks, get it at the right concentration, and then package it. In each of those vessels, you're cleaning with caustics and sanitizers, and you're handling a lot. You're transferring a lot. Even getting into the final package goes through another filler and a lot of handling and time. So I thought if we could just grow the yeast and somehow package it in that same fermenter. That reduces a lot of other tanks that have to be cleaned and handling of the yeast. So we went to basically what the pharmaceutical industry would call disposable reactors, which is a film, a plastic type of material. We call it flexible vessels to make it sound a little more sexy.
I like it.
It's pretty sexy. Anyway, so
very sexy.
So we blow this film, and it's sterile when we blow it, and so we don't have to then go back and clean it with chemicals. And then so they're very large propagators. We inoculate the yeast into them, and then they go through a few stages of growing up in there. And when the yeast was done growing and then it settles out and flocculates, we can seal it, since it's flexible, right in the bottom of the propagator.
Okay.
So still just a few percentage of the whole volume, but we can seal it right there at the right concentration without handling it, and then segment it into smaller pieces, and then those become homebrew vials and commercial packages, all from the same film. And we didn't open that up. We didn't expose the yeast to the environment or us packaging it. All we're doing is sealing it, which creates a little heat on very specific parts, just where the film melts to itself. Okay. So it doesn't heat up the rest of the yeast, for example. And then all that extra film that was part of the propagator goes back to the company where we blow the film. It gets recycled into more film. So we recycle all of that, and we use a lot less chemicals.
Gotcha. Yeah. So only a portion of the propagator actually gets used for the packaging of the individual yeast packages, and then a portion of it gets sent back, and you can reuse that actually too. Right.
Because the film, when you think about it, when the yeast grows up in there, but it has to be concentrated. It's very, very concentrated. It's only a few percentages, like I said, of the whole volume. So we accomplish that all in that propagator. And then figuring out how to seal it, how to do all of we had to build a whole bunch of new technology to do it. When I started going to some of these packaging shows, and people who were used to working with this film, a lot of people said, you can't do that. It won't even work. Because I was trying to package something without packaging it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? And everyone would just say, well, why don't you buy a packaging machine from me? High-speed packaging and film and bags or whatever is very easy. There's ketchup packs, 100 a minute or whatever they do, a lot more than that probably. But I didn't want to fill. I didn't want to package. That's what we do now with vials. That's what Yeast would do into their the foil. That's what anybody would do. They handle the yeast, and they put it into those packages. I wanted to get rid of that.
Yeah, because the ketchup is coming from another vessel into these packages.
Right.
Yeah, yours is staying in the same thing, which is amazing, and I can see why you guys are patenting this process. Yeah. And I'm trying to imagine what this room looks like when you walk into it. I mean, are these vessels, these propagators, are they hanging from the ceiling? Are they laying on the ground? I'm picturing
big,
like
tall,
IV bags.
Tall pharmaceutical style clean room.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they have to be quite large, quite tall, because even if you took a 20-barrel propagator, which you've seen a lot of 20-barrel fermenters, 20-barrel propagators used to be kind of our main size, and you put that into film and you try to make it narrow and suspend it. I mean, this thing is very, very tall now. It's a couple stories tall. So.
Oh wow. Are those on the tour if we go to White Labs?
Our clean room is not part of the tour. So, you enter into White Labs, you enter into the tasting room that's part of our little brewery there. Yeah. And then you can see the analytical lab. That's where we do a lot of beer testing and something else we do. And then behind that is the microbiology lab, which you can see on the tour. That's the yeast lab. But then the clean room is behind that where the yeast grows in, and that's all sealed away.
Yeah, understand.
But it is fun in there.
Yeah, I bet. Cool. Well, so when can homebrewers expect to purchase a Pure Pitch?
Well, we announced that we're going to do it for commercial breweries at the Craft Brewers Conference in Denver this year, and then a couple months later, we announced that we're going to do it for homebrewers at the National Homebrew Conference in Michigan just last month, and we're in the process now. So we made those announcements, but we're in the process of finalizing a lot of little details on on the package that goes, because we put another film on the outside of it to
Gotcha.
that's the same recyclability as the inner film. But that outer film has all the kind of retail information and stuff like that. So we still have a machine being built for that, for the homebrew, to do it on a high-speed level. So that should be coming to us in the next few weeks. So we're rolling out the commercial right now. We've been shipping a few every week to commercial breweries. And then in a couple of weeks, it'll be all of the yeast we're making. And then we'll continue to repackage into the homebrew vials until August, September. We're saying the fall for homebrew yeast. We don't have an exact date, but it should be August or September.
Okay, yeah, that's not too long at all.
Yeah.
Well,
So before you know it, it'll be in those, and then in the stores, you're going to see a combination for a while.
Right. Yeah. As
because
I get rid of.
They might have just got 1 week. They got an order of homebrew vials, the vials, and then the next week the pure pitch comes. So
yeah, you can. That's good. You can ease people into it.
Right. And then as the homebrew vials start to disappear, there'll be a few, maybe they'll become a little more rare.
Yeah, I might have to start. I used to really collect them until I moved, and my girlfriend made me get rid of them all, which I shed a tear over. But maybe I'll start collecting them now and maybe put them on eBay eventually, make a fortune.
Yeah, you can collect them, and that's one of the biggest questions we got at the National Homebrew Conference is, hey, I've been collecting your vials because we have this customer club, that people can sign up for on our website that you can send the vials back and get T-shirts or books and things like that.
Cool.
So you can actually send those back to us. And so people were saying, hey, I'm collecting these vials. What's going to happen now with the pure pitch? Well, our answer is, you're just going to collect those.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can send those back to us, which are going to, once the yeast is out of them, it's a pretty flat film. And so it's easy to stack them up and send them back. So people can save those. And we did a lot of fun things on the little pure pitch package. We've got a window so you can see the yeast inside. And that's still UV treated, so the yeast is not exposed to any UV rays, but you can see what's inside of it. And we made it so that the film can breathe a little CO2, so they won't build up the gas inside. They might still get a little firm because yeast can always make some gas, but they won't be enough to dissolve in and make all that foam that sometimes happens on the vials because there's nowhere for that gas to go in a vial.
Right. Yeah, I know. I've been exploded on a couple of times. So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Like and that was one of the other things we were trying to wrap in with this pure pitch was a lot of improvements that we wanted to make. And this film allows so much flexibility in doing things like that. We plan on adding a whole bunch of new things over time based on what people want. That's awesome. Why we want to get it out there, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of ideas from homebrewers.
Yeah, well, it's awesome to see that you guys are taking feedback from the customers, from the homebrewing community. And I'm sure since these things they're smaller, more stackable, they're going to take up less room in the closets. I'm sure the girlfriends and wives are going to love that too.
Yeah, she won't even know you have it. If you start saving them up again.
Yeah, you can save them in the back of a book or something.
Right.
Of a homebrewing book. So there you go. Well, I know that as soon as they hit Denver, I am going to purchase one. And I'll tell you what I'll do is I'm going to write a post about it too and do a review and show everyone what they look like. So that'll be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that in the fall. So really great to have you. Congrats on Pure Pitch. Good luck with it. Seems like an awesome product. I'm excited about it. And hope to maybe talk to you again sometime.
Okay, thanks a lot. Enjoy talking to you.
Take care.
Bye.